Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we unpack the history of the fascinating and, well, often overlooked.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving headfirst into a subject that really defies easy answers: the enigmatic world of poltergeist phenomena.
hmm
And this is actually the first of a three-part series. Our mission, as always, is to challenge common assumptions. We're going to dig into historical sources, unearthing why alleged
Those
disturbances.
classic things that go bump in the night,
Exactly, why they were viewed and investigated, particularly within the scientific and medical communities.
which might surprise some people.
I think it will. The central puzzle we're tackling right out of the gate is this. How did belief in these strange occurrences persist, at least in some scientific and medical circles, even as the interpretations of what they were drastically changed over centuries?
Yeah.
It's much more complex than just, supernatural versus science.
It really is, and it's a critical question. To even begin, we probably need to understand the term itself, poltergeist.
Right. Where does that come from?
Well, it's a German word, coined sometime in the 16th century,
Yeah.
very likely by Martin Luther, actually, the famous religious reformer.
Over.
Yeah, and it literally translates to noisy or rumbling spirit.
Noisy spirit. Makes sense.
It does. And surprisingly, even if you look at the Oxford English Dictionary today, Luther's original theological idea, it still holds a prominent place.
Really? Still.
Yeah, the OED defines it as a ghost or other supernatural being supposedly responsible for unexplained physical disturbances such as loud noises and the movement of objects. So very supernatural.
Okay.
But, and here's where the story gets really interesting. Despite that, theological definition, these alleged poltergeist phenomena have actually attracted serious open-minded interest from scientists who explicitly rejected any religious or spiritual interpretations.
So scientists who didn't believe in ghosts were still looking into noisy ghosts.
Kinda, yeah. As we continue this journey, you'll even uncover some uh, really unexpected connections to fields like theoretical physics.
Oh, okay.
I mean, think about concepts like quantum entanglement, how that might challenge our understanding of what's possible. And also psychosomatic medicine, where the mind's profound impact on the body offers, completely different avenues for explanation.
That's a crucial point. And to help us navigate this complexity, our primary guide for this exploration is the book Poltergeist by Alan Gold and Tony Cornell.
A foundational text in the field, really.
Originally published in 1979. Now, it's not strictly a history book, but it's more an empirical assessment of some of the most remarkable historical cases. It spans from the 17th century all the way into the 1970s.
A huge time frame.
It is, and it's invaluable because it vividly illustrates the investigation methods, the inherent challenges of eyewitness testimony, which are always tricky,
Always.
and the theoretical interpretations that have evolved over time. Now, it doesn't deeply explore all the cultural, religious, or political context. That's kind of where we come in.
Right, we need to add that layer.
Exactly. But it gives us a very clear sense of the types of phenomena reported and the tricky social situations the alleged victims often found themselves in, sometimes even involving police and state authorities.
Which adds another whole dimension to it.
Absolutely. So with that surprising context set, let's rewind. Let's see how these phenomena were first approached during the scientific revolution itself, right here in England.
Okay. Mid-17th century onwards.
Yeah, this period, it's often associated with the very birth of modern experimental science as we know it.
The beginning of trying to test things systematically.
Precisely. When we talk about the beginnings of modern experimental science as a collective activity, it's commonly associated with the foundation of the Royal Society in London. That was 1660.
A landmark moment.
And one of its founding members was none other than Robert Boyle.
Boyle, of Boyle's Law.
The very same. You might remember him from chemistry and physics classes. He's still remembered today for his foundational contributions to both fields. He did perhaps more than anybody at the time to advance the principles and methods of experimental science.
And this is where our modern assumptions might get challenged a bit. Like Isaac Newton and, well, virtually all other iconic figures of the scientific revolution, Robert Boyle was a deeply religious man.
Right, that's often forgotten.
It is. And while he was certainly aware of the need to rule out, pranks and other conventional explanations for reported disturbances, he didn't just dismiss them out of hand.
He didn't just laugh them off.
No, not at all. Instead, he explicitly advocated for critical but also open-minded investigations by men of science. For Boyle, it wasn't about immediate skepticism, but rigorous examination, even if the phenomena seemed, well, outlandish.
Why, though? What was his thinking?
He wanted to understand God's creation in its entirety, and that included the seemingly inexplicable.
And Boyle wasn't just advocating this in theory, was he? He was actively involved.
That's right, he put his time into it.
For example, back in the 1650s, he became deeply interested in a contemporary French case known as the Devil of Mascon.
The Devil of Mascon. Sounds dramatic.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
He was so intrigued that he actually initiated the English translation of its report and even wrote a preface to the book himself.
Wow. A leading scientist writing a preface for a book about the Devil of Mascon.
Think about that. It really frames how differently they approach these things.
It does.
And then a few years later, Boyle actively supported the study of a reported poltergeist case right here in England. This was the famous case of the drummer of Tedworth.
Ah, yes, the drummer. That one comes up a lot.
It does, and it was investigated by one of Boyle's own colleagues at the Royal Society, Joseph Glanville.
Glanville, another interesting figure.
Yeah, and Glanville later included this case in his well-known collection of supposed evidence for spirit apparitions, witchcraft, and other occult happenings.
So Glanville was compiling evidence for the supernatural.
Explicitly. So we're not just talking bumps and knocks here, but a full-on spectral percussionist. You can almost picture the bewilderment and maybe a touch of fear in those 17th century drawing rooms.
And it's vital, really vital, to connect these early modern investigations to the prevailing orthodox religious views of their time.
Okay.
For figures like Boyle and Glanville, poltergeist disturbances weren't just curious anomalies. They were often associated with hexing, with witchcraft.
Ah, so directly linked to magic and evil.
Exactly. Widely thought to be the work of unclean or evil spirits who were in league with the devil. So their scientific inquiry was, in a very real sense, a theological inquiry too.
Searching for evidence of divine or demonic intervention in the material world.
Precisely. That blurred line is just crucial to understanding their whole approach.
Okay, so that's the scientific revolution. But as the age of reason dawned, the narrative surrounding poltergeist takes an even more complex and maybe truly surprising turn.
Things shift quite dramatically.
We're about to transition to the Enlightenment period now, and things get a lot more intricate. This era saw a shifting landscape, right? An intricate interplay between science, medicine, philosophy, and, importantly, broader cultural and political factors, all shaping how these phenomena were perceived.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is how deeply intertwined political conflict, even wars, were, with debates over what constituted right versus wrong religious beliefs during this period.
So religion wasn't just personal belief, it was state politics.
Absolutely. And these debates often boiled down to conflicting claims about the nature of the mind or the soul and its supposed existence after death. In Europe, for example, one central strategy to try and upend the immense political power held by the Catholic Church for centuries,
Which was enormous.
immense, was to cast doubt on the credibility of reported encounters with supposed denizens of a spirit world.
Undermine the supernatural claims to undermine the church's authority.
Exactly. There was this recurring Enlightenment theme that Catholic fears of demons and hellfire were consciously nourished, even exploited, by a corrupt priesthood.
To maintain power over people.
Right, to maintain influence and power. And this line of reasoning, it by no means ended with the French Revolution. It had a direct impact on the creation of modern scientific disciplines as secular professions, which only really began, properly in the 19th century.
So you see how deeply politics, religion, and the very structure of science were all tangled up.
Absolutely.
And this leads us to a fascinating paradox. Because in direct contrast to popular assumptions, the Enlightenment's war on belief in unexplained phenomena, including poltergeists, it was not primarily spearheaded by science or medicine in the way we might imagine today.
Not guys in lab coats running experiments.
Not really, no. Instead, it was predominantly driven by religious and political writers, especially those with an anti-Catholic agenda.
So the pushback was ideological, political.
It seems so. It wasn't necessarily about pure empirical tests disproving things. It was often about discrediting a whole worldview.
Which raises an important question. What were the most effective weapons in this fight against supernatural belief then, if not scientific experiments?
Right.
Well, historians of Enlightenment science and medicine people like Roy Porter, Lorena Daston, Catherine Park, Michael Hunter, they've argued that the deadliest weapons against belief in supernatural phenomena during the Enlightenment were not empirical tests at all.
Okay, so what were they?
They were ridicule and sweeping pathologizations.
Ridicule and pathologization.
Uh,
So mocking people and calling them crazy.
Essentially, yes. The approach was often to simply scoff or label believers as deluded or mentally ill rather than engage in any kind of rigorous investigation.
Yeah.
Much easier.
You can see a vivid example of this kind of literature in England with the play The Drummer.
Ah, back to the drama.
Back to the Drummer. The title itself is a direct reference to that famous case, The Drummer of Tedworth, which, as we recall, was investigated by Boyle's colleague, Joseph Glanville.
Right. The Drummer is a comedy. It was written by Joseph Addison, a very well-known Whig politician aligned with the emerging liberal and commercial interests of his time, and a founding editor of the influential political magazine The Spectator. So a major public figure.
Definitely. And Addison's play is quite typical of Enlightenment responses because he pokes fun not only at believers in poltergeist manifestations, but also at atheist free thinkers.
Oh, interesting. So not just attacking the believers.
No, which shows that, like many other Enlightenment writers, Addison was actually quite religious himself. This war on supernatural beliefs, it wasn't necessarily part of a simple battle of atheism versus religion.
It's more complex than that.
Much more nuanced. Often a religious and political skirmish, maybe dressed up as intellectual superiority.
That makes sense. At the same time, though, it's important to note that not all major Enlightenment thinkers or moralists just scoffed at reports of marvelous phenomena, completely dismissing them.
Okay, so there were exceptions.
There were. For instance, Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, a prominent German thinker and playwright. He openly disagreed with other writers who insisted that reported spirit visions were impossible or, intrinsically ridiculous.
Lessing, right.
Now, while a specific quote often attributed to him about his conviction regarding a contemporary poltergeist case, the Dippersdorf poltergeist near Braunschweig, that specific quote seems untraceable, unfortunately.
Ah, oh, okay.
But his broader views on this kind of thing are clear.
And what were they?
Well, we do have Lessing's published opinion on the related question of ghostly apparitions. And my translation of what he wrote regarding this matter is quite telling, I think.
Let's hear it.
He wrote, "In favor of which can be adduced almost as much as against, which is not settled, and which cannot be settled, the currently prevailing faction of thought has tipped the scale against. Few actually think this way, yet many wish to appear thinking this way. It is those who create the clamor and dominate opinions. The majority is silent and behaves with indifference and believes this way before long, and sometimes that way, listening with zest to ghosts being mocked at day as to tales of horror at night."
Wow, that's quite a statement.
Isn't it? It's a powerful indictment of intellectual fashion.
He's basically saying people are just going along with skepticism because it's trendy, not because they've actually examined the evidence or lack thereof.
Precisely. It reveals a deep skepticism not just about supernatural claims, but about the intellectual posturing that often accompanied skepticism itself.
So wrapping up this first part, what does this all mean for our deep dive today? We've journeyed from the scientific revolution, where you had earnest, if maybe religiously tinged, investigations by figures like Boyle.
Foundational figures.
Right. To the Enlightenment's really complex and often politically charged debates, where ridicule became, well, a potent weapon.
A tool, yeah.
Yet, even amidst this shift, we see the surprising persistence of serious interest, or at least a refusal to outright dismiss these phenomena, even from unexpected corners of intellectual thought like Lessing.
Exactly. What this really tells us, I think, is that the journey to understand alleged poltergeist phenomena involves not just shifting interpretations of the events themselves,
Right.
but also a consistent thread of human curiosity, inquiry. This curiosity persisted even from unexpected corners of science and medicine, challenging the neat categories we often try to impose on historical thought.
It's about how society processes the unexplained, really, and how those processes change dramatically over time.
Precisely.
And this journey is far from over. This is just part one. In our next deep dive, we'll continue this exploration right into the 19th and 20th centuries.
And things get even more interesting there.
Oh, yeah. You'll meet even more non-religious, even atheistic scientists and medics who remain seriously interested in alleged poltergeist disturbances. Get ready for some more surprising insights.
Looking forward to it.
So here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over until our next deep dive. Given how influential cultural and political contexts were in shaping scientific inquiries centuries ago, influences that often had very little to do with actual empirical testing, what contemporary beliefs or phenomena might we be dismissing today simply because it's the prevailing fashion of thought to do so?
That's a good question to ponder.
Something to think about until our next deep dive.